Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. So, introductions. Feedback is greatly important. So, you want to reach out to me? Have questions, concerns, show ideas? Feel free to reach out to me through email, Substack, and of course, X, and of course, fill up those comments on YouTube. And on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe and share. And also, I have comedic shorts on there. And go ahead and check them out. Let me know what you think. And share those too. All right, so here are some of the audio podcast platforms that I'm on. Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Amazon Music, Deezer, just to name a few. Okay, so this episode is all about Santa Claus. I'm going to talk about the aspects of Santa Claus as far as where it began and when it began, and also with the sprinkle and dust of and the magical aspects of it, and my thoughts along with that. All right, here we are, and let's go. Da 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 dum da 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 dum da 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 dum da 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 dum. Do 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 da 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 dum da 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 dum da da dum dum ding dong dong. All right, so Santa Claus. All right, so take thoughts. It's interesting when the aspects of a whimsical, mystical figure comes from real origins. You know, for instance, there was a particular story that links to the aspect of Santa Claus, Saint Nick's, things like that, that there was a religious person, a religious figure, for instance, that the aspect of that he would, from my memory, he would have, which is part of Christian, overall Christian, I'm getting to, I don't know why my tongue is slipping right now, Catholicism, things of that nature, the beatitudes of having mercy, having charity towards your community. And with that aspect here, we get, with this story, you see that people are in need, he helped them. And so, linking to the aspect of Santa Claus with how that ties into a mixture of a real world example, a mixture of the aspects of elves, of that he's the jolliest elf there around, and how in elves, with their origin, their lineage is all about the aspects of goodwill. And so when you get into also the aspect about the commercial point of view of Santa Claus, particularly with Coca-Cola, as I had mentioned on Monday, I'm going to extend that out a little bit in my thoughts here. So, in the beginnings of the Coca-Cola company, particularly branding and an image for themselves. It's quite clever that they chose around Christmas time to market the aspect of the holidays, particularly with Santa Claus. So it sets up the ideas of how children and how families, particularly with women and the buying power with commercial goods, how they chose their brand loyalty. And so, with that being said, Coca-Cola took the efforts to craft intricately a narrative about the understanding and the care that Santa Claus brings to children. And then just with this simple Coke, you can feel the warmth of the season. And so those iconic red cans here going on to first it's, the original with the glass bottles, and then leading up to the red cans to emphasize even more so the aspect of how Santa Claus is associated with the color red. And from that gives just is the aspect of the olfactory senses when you, for instance, smell something, and then it innates, the reasons why I'm saying olfactory senses are the senses of smell, and then innates visceral reaction toward either good or bad about something. And that takes a step further with the olfactory senses to recall a memory or to create a memory within the smell. So, for instance, what am I talking about? That leads to the Coke can. So, for instance, a certain fragrance, a certain perfume or cologne, or a certain whiff of food or something, it can either recall good memories or bad memories. And so the fact that the ever-lingering presence of Coca-Cola emphasizing the aspects of Santa Claus is associated with the color red, Santa Claus is associated with the color white, and embedding those things, those colors, those things onto their Cokes, that stretches out the aspects of the feel, the emotional tie to the brand of Coca-Cola, the feeling that will innate certain people or certain genres, not certain genres, certain generations of people when they see the Coke cans and so forth, and even how that relates to today with. Now it's more plastic, but you get the point with the aspect of red and the holidays. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to jump right into the aspects of the facts of everything. So first I'm going to start out with the AI-generated response to what I asked for as far as the background of Santa Claus, and then I'm going to pull from an article. Okay, here we go. All right, here we go, the AI-generated response. So it says, origin of Santa Claus. Santa Claus, the jolly figure known for bringing gifts to children on Christmas Eve, has a rich and complex history. His origins can trace back to the 4th century Christian bishop named St. Nicholas, as I was mentioning, who was renowned for his generosity and kindness. For the aspects of this, extending that out a little bit here, where begging for clothing, shoes, things of that nature, needing money, hungry, starving, he would give. There's stories that, now that's not the right term to use here. There's stories that he would at night toss in money in the home where the person is of need, or leave shoes by the doorsteps, from recalling. And so that gives the aspect of how that all links together with, Santa Claus working at night, giving gifts, presents, leaving presents to children all around the world at night, those who are a good spirit, and then the aspects of coal too. So before I get into the rest of the AI generated response, that's quite interesting with the aspect of coal. So now here, this is just a theory of my own. And so with the aspects of coal, and I'm looking, and I'd like to know what your comments from y'all too about digging deeper into this and finding out about what does that originate to from the aspects of getting a lump of coal. But to me, my theory is about, so in Germany, Austria, Denmark, these countries here, they center around the focal point of the way to describe this is the I guess you can say, if you want to put it in the aspect of a cinematic category of it, the villainous version of Santa Claus, and how there's a whole moral lesson, a graphic lesson too, with that, which is something to say about the differences between the origins of fables and stories and fairy tales for children throughout the world, where they go into great depths about describing this sort of villainous Santa Claus here. And Crumps, for instance, those lineages and things like that, how if you're not careful, if you're not obedient, if you're not on the straight and narrow as a child, your fate will be at their hands where it won't work well for you. And with sparing you the gore here, it's pretty damaging fate. And so I think maybe that has something to do with that. Okay, so influences of Norse mythology. In the 13th century, the legend of St. Nicholas merged with elements of Norse mythology, particularly the figure of Odin. The god of wisdom and war, Odin was often depicted as leading a hunting party through the skis, accompanied by his 8-legged horse. Splendor. The similarity to this, Santa's reindeer, drawn sleigh, and magical flight through the night sky may have originated from these Norse influences. The Americanization of Santa Claus. In the 17th and 18th centuries, Dutch settlers brought their Santa Claus traditions to America, where they merged with existing Christmas celebrations. Washington Irving's 1809 book, A History of New York, popularized the name Santa Claus and helped establish the character as a bringer of gifts. In the 19th century, we're talking about illustrations here. So, Thomas Nast, 1881. Illustration of Harper's Weekly based on the Clement Clark Moore's 1823 poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, also known as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, further solidated the modern image of Santa Claus, a jolly bearded man in a red suit with a round belly and a sack of toys. So throughout the 20th century, Santa Claus continued to evolve by advertising influences, media, where we got, for instance, from my generation, and then what's going on now, different aspects of Santa Claus. So the Santa Claus, and then you have the series that's standing out with the Santa Claus, the remake of Miracle on the 34th Street, which is quite interesting. So the original versus the remake. The original with Natalie Wood, God rest her soul, and the depiction of the innocence, how telling that story intricately with how the problem when you lose your innocence so young, you lose the spirit of the being of joy, the spirit, but the joy of the season, the joy of being a optimism, really, what it links to, because they're trying to say that when it's not so simple to see it as, this is this little girl, she's being cynical and she's looking at things for what they are and just being realistic. But doing that's hardening her heart, and that's along the line when she becomes an adult, that'll obscure her perspective towards the importance of having hope, And that has a whole lot of underlying themes to that, too. So, going on to the aspects of how Santa Claus is seen now, it's unfortunate that with the Santa Claus, for Disney, the series that they did, they decided to ruin, as they often have been doing in these years, and I don't know why, but there's that aspect of they want to be on the fringe, so here we go by being really radical and progressive when you shouldn't be, when you're telling tales of more of a moral compass when you shouldn't be interlacing ideologies or political agendas into it, and that ruined the aspect of the series. But needless to say, it was nice to see that Tim Allen was at the forefront, still trying to bring that back in. But you only can do what you can do when you have one foot in the battle. But on the other hand, you have aspects of movies. For instance, there was on Netflix, and I'm sure it's on other streaming devices, with Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn, when they his depiction of Santa Claus in that movie. And it's quite nice to give back to the tradition of Santa Claus here. All right, so Santa remains a beloved figure, symbolizing generosity, kindness, and the magic of the holiday season. All right, so here I go. I am going to read to you the aspects of the history of Father Christmas and the heritage. And this is from the UK. So I am going to link this to you in this episode. So the English origins of Father Christmas. From his earliest days till the 19th century, Father Christmas was strictly an allegory figure. He was a symbol of Christmas season rather than a mythical being. He was often depicted as a merry old man who presided over festive parties, not a gentle giver of gifts, and that largely was because Christmas was celebrated differently, with much more emphasis on entertainment for adults. So the earliest evidence for a personified Christmas can be found in the 15th century carol in which a character called Sir Christmas shared the news of Christ's birth. He tells the audience to make good cheer and be right merry. Another a precursor to Father Christmas would be found in York, where a festival called the Yule Ridings took place on December 21st. A man disguised as Yule carried cakes and meats through the streets and threw nuts into the crowd. In 1572, the aspects of this was banned after complaints of rude and raunchy, that aspect behavior for, secular versus everyday aspects too. Hold on just a second. So, elsewhere in Tudor and the Stuart times, especially appointed lords or misslure oversaw Christmas celebrations in aristocratic houses and was sometimes given names like Captain Christmas, the Christmas Lord, or Prince Christmas. But none of these early personifications of Christmas made him out to be a father or an old man. For that, the world had to wait for the playwright Ben Jonson. Jonson's Christmas, the mask was performed for the royal court in 1616. In the play, the character of Christmas appears in old-fashioned clothes with a long, thin beard, calling himself Old Christmas and Old George Christmas. He shields the guards from refusing to let him into the party and argues that he is as good as a Protestant as any in my parish. Appointing a comment at a time, this was a poignant, a preliminarily a great example is how this is described. Comment at a time when Christmas celebrations were coming under attack from Puritans. Excuse me. Jonson's character of Christmas is definitely old, and he is definitely a father. He brings with him several of his sons and daughters. He's personifying a different tradition of the period, with names like Carol, for instance, mince pie, mummy, and Walsey. Christmas itself came with no gifts but one of his sons' New Year's gift, which brought an orange and a sprig of rosemary with a collar of gingerbread and a bottle of wine on the arm. The Puritan attack on Christmas intensified before and after the English Civil War of 1642 through 51. Royalists flocked to Christmas to the defense and once again personified the season to make their case, as in the 1645 pamphlet with the the aspect of the conviction and imprisonment of Christmas. This allegory story, a woman asked the Oxford town crier where old Father Christmas has gone, she is told that the poor old man was condemned after a conviction, cast into prison among the king's soldiers, fearing to be hanged. So sure enough, in 1647, the Parliament banned Christmas altogether, with Easter, Whitsun, and many other traditional holidays. He was also featured in the pamphlet of 1652 by the royalist John Taylor called The Benediction of Christmas. Now, why am I talking about this, going to the depth of this? It's very important to get the tapestry of how Christmas is seen as a universal aspect of how okay, let me rephrase that. Christmas is seen as a universal holiday. So this means that from the UK, from the Baltics, from the Asian continents and the African continents and so forth, there are versions of celebrations of Christmas. Why is this? This is because the universal undertone and the common denominator is Christ. So, given that, it's quite interesting to see how the global representation, particularly in the English-speaking country of the UK, how that translates to in America, how Christmas is thought about and how those influenced a lot of things in the early celebrations of what is known as Christmas of today. And so again, I can't emphasize that enough, the aspect of how, now I went into depth about this and I would suggest that if you're not a supporter, it'd be greatly appreciated to you enjoy my content, to support and hear the content that I make for supporters on Sunday. So I went into depth. I'll just give you a little taste about it. Went into depth talking about the aspects of how important it is that we live in a country, how America is the beacon and it needs to be protected and precious because we have the aspect of the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. And how that in the UK particularly, how you can be persecuted for simply airing out your grievances is outrageous. And so I think bringing in these aspects is good to get the overall tone about the origin of Christmas and give more perspective to it. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up and talk about a little bit more about the U.S. version of Santa Claus. And of course, this link will be provided for you along with the other link in this episode. So this is from history.com. Take this with a grain of salt. But for its beginnings, educational beginnings, it was good, but it's not what it used to be. But here we go. Here is a History Channel in-depth depiction about the American origin of Santa Claus. So it goes into more depth about St. Nicholas, the real Santa Claus. So the legend of Santa Claus can be traced back hundreds of years to a monk named St. Nicholas. It is believed that Nicholas was born sometime around AD 2080 and is near Moriah, which is modern-day Turkey. Much people admired his purity and kindness. St. Nicholas became the subject of many legends. It is said that he gave away all of his inherited wealth and traveled the countryside helping the poor and the sick. One of his best-known St. Nicholas stories is the time he saved 3 poor sisters from being sold into slavery or prostitution by their father by providing them with a dowry so they could be married. Over the course of many years, Nicholas' popularity spread and he became known as the protector of children and sailors. His feast day is celebrated on the anniversary of his death, December 6th. This was traditionally considered a lucky day to make large purchases or to get married. By the Renaissance, St. Nicholas was the most popular saint in Europe. Even after the Protestant Reformation, where the zeal against saints began to be discouraged, St. Nicholas maintained a positive reputation, especially in Holland. And it's very prolific. So, with the Protestant Reformation, for those who are in the know, but those who aren't, I'm just going to give them a brief commentary about it. So it's quite interesting with the aspect of not separating the aspect of greed and the sin in that, and to overlacing it with being pious as far as pouring money into the church, and the people not having a say in that, or people not having a say in how they want to allocate their money versus every day what they need for their household versus the church and so forth. So Santa Claus comes to New York. Santa Claus made his first inroads in American popular culture toward the end of the 18th century. In December 1773 and again in 1774, a New York newspaper reported that groups of Dutch families had gathered to honor the anniversary of his death. The name Santa Claus evolved from Nick's Dutch name Sinterklaas, a shortened form of St. Nicholas, Dutch of St. Nicholas. In 1804, Jean Pentard, a member of the New York Historical Society, distributed woodcuts of St. Nicholas at the Society's annual meeting. The background of the engraving contains now familiar Santa images, including stockings filled with toys and fruit hung over a fireplace. In 1809, Washington Irving helped to popularize the Santa Claus story when he referred to St. Nicholas as the patron saint of New York in his book, The History of New York. As his prominence grew, Santa Claus was described as everything from a rascal with a blue 3-cornered hat, red waistcoat, and yellow stockings to a man wearing a broad brim hat and a huge pair of Flemish trunk hose. Shopping malls with Santas. Gift giving mainly centered around children as being an important part of the Christmas celebrations since the holiday's rejuvenation in the early 19th century. Stores began to advertise Christmas shopping in 1820. By the 1840s, newspapers were creating separate sections for holiday advertisement, which often featured imagery of the newly popular Santa Claus. In 1841, thousands of children visited a Philadelphia shop to see a life-size Santa Claus model. It was only a matter of time before stores began to attract children and their parents with the lure of a peek at a live Santa Claus. In the early 1890s, the Salvation Army needed money to pay for the free Christmas meals they provided to needy families. They began dressing up unemployed men in Santa Claus suits and sending them into the streets of New York to solicit donations. Those familiar Salvation Army Santas have been ringing bells on the street corners of American cities ever since. And I'll end on this. So, the most iconic department store Santa is Kris Kringle. In the 1947 classic Santa Claus movie Miracle on 34th Street, a young Natalie Wood played a little girl who believes Kris Kringle, played by Edmund Gwenn, who won an Oscar for the role, when he says he is the real Santa. Miracle on 34th Street was remade in 1994, and it starred Lord Richard, forgive me for the pronunciation of this, Anton Brott, and Mira Wilson. With that said, I'd like to know what your thoughts and your aspects of Santa Claus. What do you think about the impact of Santa Claus in society? Either feel free to reach out to me through, feel free to reach out to me either through email, Substack, X, and of course fill up those comments in YouTube. We greatly appreciate it. This reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care. Bye-bye.